There are nights when life breaks you so suddenly that even your own reflection feels like a stranger. Wyatt Hale never imagined losing everything in a single sunrise. His fortune vanished, his name turned to ash, and the world he built with pride collapsed without warning. But this story isn't about what he lost. It's about what God rebuilt when there was nothing left to save. Because sometimes, God allows a life to fall apart so he can rebuild it on the right foundation. And just when Wyatt thought no one would ever look at him with compassion again, a simple girl named Chloe crossed his path with nothing but gentle eyes, steady faith, and a kindness that felt supernatural. She didn't know his past. She didn't know his mistakes. Yet she spoke to him like someone who saw destiny where everyone else saw failure. What happens when a broken man meets a woman whose faith refuses to let him stay shattered? What does God do when pride destroys a life, and a humble heart steps in to restore it? Stay with me until the end of this video. This story will show you the kind of redemption only heaven can orchestrate. Subscribe to Redeemed Hearts for more stories of faith, healing, and second chances. Wyatt Hale had lived his entire adult life believing that success was the same as safety. As long as his empire stood tall, he thought nothing could touch him. No betrayal, no loss, no whisper of fear. But the night everything collapsed proved how fragile a pride-built kingdom truly is. By dawn, he wasn't a CEO. He was a man in ruins. It started with a single phone call, the kind that steals the ground beneath your feet. A trembling voice telling him the board had voted him out. A scandal breaking across every news channel. Investors turning their backs faster than he could breathe. Wyatt felt the world closing in like a vice. He drove through the night, headlights carving through rain-soaked highways. He didn't know where he was going. He just needed distance. Distance from shame, from cameras, from the whispers of people he once trusted. Distance from the version of himself he could no longer face. His chest felt hollow, as if grief had scraped him clean. Every billboard he passed seemed to mock the man he used to be. Every mile reminded him of what he'd built, and how easily it had been taken. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. A silent scream pressed behind his teeth. Failure had never tasted so bitter. When the sun finally rose, he found himself in a small coastal town he didn't even recognize. Waves crashed against distant rocks, as if the ocean itself was grieving with him. Wyatt parked outside an empty marina and closed his eyes. He had never felt so lost, so stripped, so painfully human. He whispered to himself, "God, where are you now?" But no answer came, only the cold morning wind brushing against his face. Wyatt slammed the car door shut and walked toward a convenience store. He needed water, anything to ground him back into reality. But the moment he stepped inside, his vision blurred. The weight of exhaustion finally pinned him down. He leaned against a shelf, breathing hard, trying to steady himself. The room swayed, colors merging into a dull haze. His legs buckled, and he grabbed the edge of the counter. "Sir? Are you okay?" A voice called out, but it sounded distant. Wyatt felt his world tilt. Then everything went dark. He woke up minutes later on the cold floor, a gentle hand resting on his shoulder. "Hey, slow down, you're all right," a soft voice murmured. He blinked, focusing on the face above him. A girl, or rather a young woman with warm hazel eyes full of concern. Her presence felt strangely steady, almost peaceful. "You fainted," she said quietly, offering him a bottle of water. I'm fine," Wyatt lied, his voice rough with pride. But his trembling hands exposed the truth. The woman didn't push him. She simply waited. Her patience unsettled him more than her kindness. "Try sipping," she encouraged, sitting beside him on the floor. Wyatt frowned. People didn't sit on floors for him. People used to stand, wait, serve, admire. This girl didn't seem interested in any of that. She was simply human. And it disarmed him completely. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the moment. "What's your name?" he asked, almost reluctantly. "Chloe," she replied with a small smile. No pity, no curiosity, no recognition in her tone. Just a simple, steady kindness he wasn't used to. Wyatt felt his guard rise out of instinct. Kindness usually came with strings attached, but something about her felt different, clean, honest, uncalculated. And that frightened him in a way he couldn't explain. "Thank you," he muttered, the words tasting awkward in his mouth. Chloe stood and offered her hand to help him up. For a moment he hesitated. Men like him didn't accept help, but today, he didn't feel like a man like him. He felt small, breakable, human. So he took her hand. The moment their palms touched, he felt a strange warmth. Not romantic, not magical. Something deeper. Like someone lifting a corner of the darkness he had wrapped himself in. Her eyes softened as she studied him. "You've been carrying something heavy," she murmured. He swallowed hard, if she knew the half of it. But she wasn't asking for confessions, just acknowledging the truth. "Everyone carries something," he said sharply, trying to dismiss it. Chloe didn't flinch. She simply nodded. "Well, whatever yours is, you don't have to fall alone," she said gently. Wyatt froze, caught off guard. Those words hit the exact place he had been avoiding. The place where the loneliness hurt the most. It felt like she had reached straight through the armor he wore. He stepped back, overwhelmed, unsure how to respond to such kindness. "I should go," he muttered, grabbing his jacket. But his heart thudded with something unfamiliar. Not anger, not pride, something like longing. As he walked out of the store, he glanced back just once. Chloe was still watching him, not with pity, but with hope. Hope he didn't think he deserved. He didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. Because God rebuilds stories through people we least expect. Wyatt spent the rest of the morning wandering through the small coastal streets, trying to outrun the memory of Chloe's words. He didn't want kindness, not from a stranger, not from anyone. Kindness made him feel seen, and being seen made him feel exposed. But no matter how much he tried to shake it off, her voice echoed in his chest. "You don't have to fall alone." He pushed his hands into his pockets and walked aimlessly until he reached the boardwalk. Waves rolled against the shore with a rhythm that felt almost intentional. Life had slowed down here, painfully slow for a man who once lived in skyscrapers. But today, the stillness felt like a mirror, and Wyatt didn't like what he saw. He sat on a bench overlooking the ocean, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. He still couldn't believe how fast everything had been taken from him. The world he'd held together with control and authority had collapsed overnight. No warnings, no mercy, no time to fix anything. Just a sudden, violent ending. For years, he had treated God like a distant consultant, someone to turn to only in impossible moments. But now, staring at the water, Wyatt realized something uncomfortable. He had stopped talking to God long before his life fell apart, maybe even long before his company rose to the top. Success had filled the space where faith used to live. His jaw tightened as he remembered the headlines, the accusations, the betrayal from someone he had mentored himself, and the board that didn't even fight for him. He had never felt so disposable. Wyatt exhaled shakily, trying to hold back a wave of emotions. He had lost money, reputation, friendships, but there was another loss he didn't dare admit. He had lost himself. The man staring at the ocean wasn't the one he used to be. He wasn't even sure who he was now. A sudden dizziness hit him, and he gripped the edge of the bench. He hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon. He stood and walked toward a small cafe nearby, hoping food would help. But as he reached for the door, his hands trembled again. His body was paying the price for the weight he'd been carrying. He ordered something simple and sat near the window. The waitress placed a plate in front of him, but he just stared at it. Why did the world feel so heavy? Why did breathing feel like lifting a mountain? He buried his face in his hands. "Rough day?" a familiar voice asked. Wyatt froze. He hadn't expected to see her again so soon. Chloe stood beside the table, apron tied around her waist, cheeks rosy from the morning rush. Her eyes softened when she saw his expression. "You work here?" he asked, surprised despite himself. She laughed quietly. "Small town. Most of us work in 2 or 3 places." Her smile wasn't bright. It was gentle, the kind that didn't demand anything in return. Wyatt didn't realize how much he needed that softness until it was right in front of him. His shoulders slowly relaxed. Without asking, Chloe sat across from him. She didn't crowd him, didn't interrogate him, she just existed softly in the space. Wyatt felt something loosening inside his chest. Silence wasn't awkward with her. It felt safe. "You look like someone who hasn't eaten in a while," she finally said. Wyatt didn't deny it. He picked up the fork and forced himself to take a bite. The food tasted simple, but grounding. And for the first time in days, he felt a tiny spark of stability. Chloe watched him thoughtfully. "You know, sometimes God brings us somewhere quiet to help us breathe again." Wyatt paused mid-bite. He wanted to reject the idea, to push it away like every other reminder of faith. But he couldn't deny the timing. "I'm not sure God is involved in anything happening to me," he muttered. Chloe rested her arms on the table. "Maybe he is involved. Just not in the way you expected." Her voice held no judgment, only certainty. Wyatt felt something shift almost imperceptibly. "Why do you care?" he asked, more defensively than intended. Chloe didn't flinch. "Because hurting people deserve compassion, and because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it either." Her honesty caught him off guard. Kindness without agenda was foreign to him. He studied her for a moment, trying to understand her calm. She seemed to carry her own story, her own scars, but none of them had made her bitter. Instead, they made her softer, stronger in a way he had never seen. And Wyatt suddenly wondered what she had survived. Before he could ask, Chloe stood and took a small notepad from her apron. "If you're staying in town for a while, I know a place where you could work temporarily," she said. Wyatt blinked. "Work?" She smiled. "Nothing fancy. Just a little help at the flower shop." He wasn't sure whether to laugh or be offended, but the sincerity in her eyes silenced every objection. Something in him, something quiet and exhausted, whispered that maybe he needed this. Maybe he needed to be somewhere humble, somewhere small, somewhere God could reach him again. The next morning, Wyatt walked toward the flower shop Chloe had mentioned, unsure why he was even going. He told himself it was because he needed money, nothing more. But a quieter, stubborn truth pulsed beneath the surface. He wanted to see her again. Her steadiness, her strange hope. Something about Chloe tugged at the parts of him he had buried. The bell above the door chimed softly as he entered the small shop. The place looked like a sanctuary. Warm light, gentle colors, flowers blooming in deliberate harmony. It smelled of lavender and fresh soil, a scent that felt like relief. Wyatt stood frozen, unsure how he fit in such a peaceful space. He felt like a storm stepping into a place built for gentleness. Chloe emerged from behind a counter, carrying a watering can. "Oh, you came," she said, eyes bright with quiet surprise. Wyatt nodded stiffly, trying not to look as uncertain as he felt. This wasn't his world. It wasn't sharp or loud or ruthless, and that terrified him more than any boardroom. "I guess I can help," he muttered. Chloe smiled, soft, sincere. "You won't be doing anything complicated. Just deliveries, lifting boxes, carrying things I can't." He raised an eyebrow. "You're not afraid I'll break something?" She laughed lightly. "Everything here grows back." Wyatt wasn't sure how to respond to that. He looked around again, at the plants, the colors, the fragile beauty of everything. This place felt like the opposite of the world he had come from. It didn't demand anything from him. It didn't measure his worth. Chloe handed him a small list. "These are deliveries for today," she explained. Wyatt looked at the handwritten notes, the simple addresses, the quiet rhythm of her day. Nothing here was rushed. Nothing was dramatic, except the storm inside him. He followed her into the back room where boxes of fresh stems waited. Chloe moved gracefully, with a calm that seemed impossible for someone her age. Wyatt noticed how she touched every flower gently, like each one had a story. He wondered who had taught her to be that way, and why the world hadn't hardened her. "Do you always help strangers who faint in grocery stores?" he asked. Chloe shrugged, tying ribbons around a bouquet. "I don't think God sends people into our path by accident." Wyatt scoffed, but not unkindly. He wasn't ready to believe that yet, not fully. Chloe didn't push. She just kept arranging blooms with an expression of peaceful focus. Wyatt found himself watching her more than the flowers. There was something healing about her presence, something he didn't have a name for. When he carried the first box outside, the cool breeze hit his face. For a moment, he inhaled deeply, almost freely. The work felt strange but grounding. Not humiliating, not beneath him, just human. Back in the shop, Chloe asked, "How are you feeling today?" Wyatt hesitated. People never asked how he felt. They asked what he could do. "I'm managing," he said. Chloe tilted her head. Managing isn't the same thing as healing. Her words landed deeper than she knew. He placed the empty box on the floor, trying to mask the sudden ache in his chest. Why did everything she said feel like truth wrapped in softness? Why did it reach places he had locked away? Wyatt rubbed his forehead, overwhelmed. Chloe noticed, but didn't crowd him. "You don't have to explain what you're going through," she said quietly. "But you also don't have to pretend you're okay." Wyatt's breath caught, but he said nothing. Her compassion felt too precise, too intentional, like she could see the cracks he tried to hide. He turned to leave with the next delivery, but Chloe gently touched his arm. Her touch was light, respectful, but grounding. "Wyatt, broken things can still be repaired." He froze, every muscle tightening. It was the first time someone had spoken hope directly into his bruised pride. He swallowed hard. "I don't think you know how broken I am," he whispered. Chloe's eyes softened even more. "I don't need to know. God already does. And he's not done with you." Her certainty shook him. Wyatt stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him. The sunlight hit his face, warm and steady. For the first time in weeks, he didn't feel completely suffocated. He didn't feel saved. Not yet. But he didn't feel lost either. As he walked down the street with the bouquet in hand, he felt something unfamiliar, a tiny spark of peace. A feeling he didn't trust, but didn't reject. Maybe the flower shop wasn't just a job. Maybe it was the beginning of something bigger. Wyatt looked back through the shop window and saw Chloe arranging flowers with quiet devotion. A girl who lived faith instead of preaching it. A girl whose kindness felt like a key turning inside his locked heart. He didn't know it yet. But this was the day his slow transformation truly began. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm Wyatt never expected to tolerate, let alone appreciate. Every morning, he arrived at the flower shop before the door even opened. Chloe always greeted him with a gentle smile, the kind that didn't demand anything. It felt strangely grounding to start his days with peace instead of pressure. Something inside him softened, even if he didn't understand how. Wyatt found himself watching Chloe more than he intended. Not out of romance, but out of wonder. How could someone carry so much light in such a quiet way? She laughed easily, prayed softly, and forgave quickly. Qualities that felt foreign to a man used to walls and weapons. One morning, Wyatt walked in to find her kneeling beside a display of tulips. Her head was bowed, eyes closed, hands resting gently on the counter. He froze, unsure if he was interrupting something sacred. "Are you praying?" he whispered. She opened her eyes and smiled. "Just thanking God before we begin." He swallowed hard, unexpectedly moved. He had seen people pray, but not like this. Not with sincerity that felt alive. It wasn't a ritual for her. It was connection. Wyatt felt something shift in the air, like her prayer had stirred something invisible in him, something he didn't want to admit he missed. "Do you want to join?" Chloe asked gently. Wyatt took a step back, startled. No. I wouldn't know what to say." "That's okay. Listening counts too." Her voice held no pressure, only invitation. He stayed still, hands shoved in his pockets, but his heart leaned forward. Her words wrapped around the room like warmth. "Lord, bless this place and whoever walks through these doors today." Wyatt felt a strange tightness in his throat. It had been years since anyone prayed for him, or near him. He didn't know how much he had missed the sound. Chloe stood and dusted off her hands. "Ready for today?" she asked, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Wyatt nodded, though part of him still felt shaken. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't running from God. He was standing in a room where God felt close. They spent the morning arranging bouquets for wedding clients. Chloe hummed softly while she worked, a habit that made Wyatt strangely calm. He found himself matching her pace, copying the way she handled each stem with care. It was the first time in years he had slowed down enough to notice small beauty, and the stillness didn't feel threatening anymore. During a delivery run, Wyatt caught his reflection in a shop window. He barely recognized the man staring back, not because of exhaustion, but because his eyes looked different. Less angry, less hollow, almost human again. When he returned, he found Chloe struggling with a heavy box of soil. Without thinking, he rushed over. "Hey, let me." Chloe stepped back, relieved but smiling. "Thanks. I always forget this one weighs twice as much as it looks. You shouldn't be lifting this at all," he muttered. Chloe crossed her arms playfully. "Wyatt Hale, are you worried about me?" He stiffened. "I'm just being practical." Her grin widened. Practical." He turned away, but his ears burned with embarrassment. After a few seconds of silence, Chloe spoke again. "Thank you for helping. Seriously." Her tone was softer now, sincere, without teasing. Wyatt nearly froze at how good it felt to be appreciated for something simple. In his old life, gratitude had always been strategic, never genuine. As the afternoon sun warmed the shop's windows, Wyatt noticed something. Chloe never rushed him, never demanded explanations, never pushed for his past. She simply let him exist, without judgment. For a man who spent years proving his worth, this was disarming. Kindness felt more dangerous than anger ever had. When she handed him another bouquet to deliver, their fingers brushed. The contact was brief, but jolting. Wyatt stepped back, surprised by the warmth that shot through him. Not romantic, deeper. Like his soul recognizing something his mind wasn't ready to name. Chloe noticed his reaction but didn't mention it. Instead, she said softly, "Broken things can bloom again." Wyatt's chest tightened. "Why do you keep saying things like that?" he whispered. "Because it's true," she replied, simple as breathing. Wyatt walked outside with the bouquet, the cool air hitting his face. Her words echoed in him, louder than the ocean waves nearby. He didn't understand why her kindness felt like both comfort and confrontation, but he couldn't deny the truth. She was reaching places he had kept locked for years. He leaned against the side of the building, trying to steady his heartbeat. Every day with Chloe chipped a little more of his old self away. Every prayer, every smile, every gentle truth felt like a slow dismantling. He wasn't sure if he was ready to be rebuilt, but he wasn't running anymore. As he looked back through the window, he saw Chloe placing fresh flowers in a vase, humming softly. The scene wasn't magical, it was ordinary, but Wyatt felt something extraordinary unfolding in the ordinary. Something sacred, fragile, and impossible to ignore. And tomorrow, everything inside him would be tested. For the first time in weeks, Wyatt woke before sunrise, his mind restless. Sleep had become easier since he started helping at the flower shop. But last night was different. Chloe's words, "Broken things can bloom again," kept replaying in his head. He didn't know whether to believe them or run from them, and running had always been easier. He walked to the shop early, hoping the quiet morning would clear his thoughts. But when he arrived, Chloe was already there arranging lilies. The golden light framed her like something out of another world. Wyatt hesitated at the door, suddenly afraid of the peace she represented. Peace felt like surrender, and he didn't know how to surrender. "Morning," Chloe said softly as he stepped inside. Wyatt nodded, avoiding her eyes. "You okay?" she asked, sensing the shift in his energy. "Fine," he muttered. It was a lie they both recognized instantly. Chloe didn't push. She never did. Instead, she handed him a stack of boxes. "We need to reorganize the back room. Think you can help?" Wyatt grabbed the boxes without hesitation. Physical tasks were easier than confronting his own heart. But halfway through lifting a heavy crate, something inside him snapped. Not physically, emotionally. A wave of frustration surged through him, sharp and uninvited. Why was he here? Why was he bending, changing, feeling? He slammed the crate onto the table harder than intended. Chloe flinched at the sound, then looked at him carefully. "What's going on?" she asked gently. Wyatt turned away, jaw clenched. Nothing, he snapped, but his eyes betrayed him. Anger, fear, shame tangled together. Chloe stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. Wyatt, you don't have to fight everything alone. He spun around, the words hitting a raw nerve. Stop saying that, he said sharply. I'm not your project, I don't need saving. Chloe didn't react to the harshness in his voice. She simply held her ground, calm and unwavering. I don't think you need saving, she replied. I think you need honesty, with yourself. Wyatt felt his chest tighten painfully. He turned away again, pacing. I don't belong here. I don't belong in this shop, in this town, in this... He gestured vaguely toward everything around them. I'm not meant for this kind of life. His voice cracked on the final word. Chloe took a slow breath. No one said you had to stay here forever, Wyatt, she said softly. But maybe you're here right now because God needed your heart to slow down. Wyatt's eyes flashed with hurt. Don't bring God into this. He's the one who let everything fall apart. Chloe didn't argue. Instead, she stepped closer, eyes full of compassion. Maybe he allowed it because he knew your foundation was cracking. Wyatt swallowed hard, feeling the truth he didn't want to accept. Truth always sounded softer coming from her, which made it harder to ignore. I don't want to talk about this, he muttered. Okay, Chloe said quietly. The simplicity of her response disarmed him more than a confrontation would have. She didn't demand explanations or force him to feel anything. She just offered presence. Wyatt lowered himself onto a stool, breathing unevenly. Everything inside him felt tangled. Anger at himself, fear of failure, confusion over the peace Chloe brought. I don't know who I am anymore, he confessed through clenched teeth. Chloe's expression softened, her eyes almost glowing with empathy. That's usually where healing begins. He looked up sharply, expecting judgment, but found none. Chloe's gaze held nothing but steady compassion. She wasn't afraid of his brokenness. She wasn't fazed by his sharp edges. That scared him more than anything. Why are you being so kind to me? He asked, voice barely audible. Chloe hesitated, then answered with quiet certainty. Because someone was kind to me when I was at my lowest. And because God doesn't waste broken people. Wyatt felt something crack inside him, something deep and old. He didn't know whether it was pain or hope. He rubbed his face, overwhelmed. I shouldn't be here, he whispered again. Chloe gently touched his forearm, a grounding, gentle gesture. Maybe not forever, she said, but you're here now, and that matters. Wyatt closed his eyes, breathing shakily. For a moment, neither of them moved. The shop was silent except for the distant hum of the cooler. Chloe stepped back, giving him space, but her presence lingered like a steadying heartbeat. Wyatt looked at her, really looked, and saw not pity, but faith. Faith in him. Faith for him. Faith despite him. He didn't understand why, but he knew one thing with a sudden, startling clarity. Her kindness was going to change his entire life, and whether he was ready or not. For a few quiet days, the flower shop felt like a sanctuary again. Wyatt worked in silence. Chloe hummed softly, and the world outside seemed to slow its pace. He almost convinced himself that maybe, just maybe, this small town could hold his shattered pieces together. But peace rarely lasts long for a man with headlines behind him, especially when the past knows how to find you. It started with whispers. 2 women at the cafe staring too long. A man at the hardware store squinting as if placing a memory. Wyatt dismissed it as paranoia at first. But deep down, he felt the familiar sting of recognition forming. Then one afternoon, as Wyatt stepped out of the flower shop to make a delivery, he saw it. A newspaper with his face printed on the front, left on a bench. His name in bold letters underneath a headline filled with scandal and accusation. His stomach dropped. The past had finally caught his scent. He snatched the paper from the bench, hands shaking. Old emotions flooded him. Shame, anger, betrayal. Even the ink felt heavy, like a weight he couldn't outrun. He shoved the paper under his arm and hurried back into the shop. Chloe looked up and instantly sensed something wrong. Wyatt? What happened? She asked, stepping closer. He didn't answer. He simply dropped the newspaper on the counter. Her eyes scanned it, widening with realization. Wyatt braced himself for the disappointment he felt certain would follow. But Chloe didn't step back. She didn't recoil, didn't judge, didn't let fear flicker in her expression. She simply looked at him, deeply, steadily. "Is this why you've been carrying so much pain?" Her voice was soft, but it cut straight through him. He swallowed hard, throat tight. "That's who I used to be," he whispered, barely able to speak. Chloe's gaze softened even further. "Who you used to be is not who you are now." Wyatt felt his chest constrict painfully. Before he could respond, the bell above the door chimed. A couple walked in, clutching the same newspaper. Their eyes darted between the photo and Wyatt. "So it's true," the woman whispered, her tone sharp. Chloe stepped protectively between them. "He works here?" The man pressed, glaring. Chloe lifted her chin. "Yes, he does. And you knew about all this?" "I know who he is today," she said firmly. Her courage startled everyone, including Wyatt. The couple exchanged an uncomfortable glance. "This town deserves to know who's among us," the woman muttered. Wyatt's shoulders tensed, the shame sinking deeper. He waited for Chloe to fold under the pressure, but she didn't move. "With respect," Chloe replied calmly. "Everyone in this town has a past. His just happens to be printed." The couple seemed taken aback by her boldness. Still, they turned and left, the bell closing the moment behind them. Wyatt exhaled shakily, unable to meet Chloe's eyes. "You shouldn't have done that," he murmured. "But I meant it," she replied gently. Wyatt shook his head, overwhelmed. "Their right to judge, their right to question me." Chloe stepped closer, voice steady. "No, people judge what they don't understand. God redeems what others condemn." Wyatt pressed a hand against the counter, trying to steady himself. "I shouldn't stay here, I shouldn't drag you into this." Chloe placed a hand over his. Light, steady, unshaken. "You're not dragging me anywhere, Wyatt." He closed his eyes, fighting back emotion. Her voice grew softer. "You came here broken, and broken people deserve gentle places to heal." Wyatt let out a trembling breath. "How do you keep seeing good in people?" "Because God kept seeing good in me," she whispered. He lifted his eyes to hers, and for a moment the world fell away. There was no past, no scandal, no headlines. Just her unwavering belief. Belief he didn't feel he deserved. Belief that made him ache in ways he couldn't explain. "Chloe, I don't know how to make this right." "You don't have to make it right," she said softly. "You just have to be honest. With yourself, with God, with the people who care." Wyatt swallowed hard. He wasn't used to honesty, only strategy. But Chloe was teaching him something far more powerful. The shop was quiet again, the echoes of confrontation lingering in the air. Wyatt stared at the door, half expecting more angry faces to appear. But Chloe gently guided him back to the work table. "One step at a time," she murmured. "Just stay. Don't run." Wyatt sat beside her, heart pounding. Something inside him broke open, a crack wide enough for truth to seep through. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring or whether the town would accept him. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Chloe wasn't going anywhere. And neither was God. Wyatt barely slept that night. Every headline, every whisper, every accusing glance replayed in his mind like a cruel loop. But Chloe's defense stood out louder than all of it. Her words, "I know who he is today," echoed with impossible clarity. He had no idea why she believed in him, but he knew he had to be honest with her. The next morning he walked into the flower shop before it opened. Chloe was behind the counter, unpacking fresh stems. She looked up, immediately sensing the storm brewing inside him. "Wyatt?" she whispered. "I need to talk," he said, voice raw. Chloe set the flowers aside and stepped closer. "I'm listening." Wyatt swallowed hard, struggling to begin. He had built a life out of polished statements and strategic silence, but none of that would help him now. "I wasn't a good man," he said finally, the words trembling in the air. Chloe's eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. "I built my company on pressure, control, pride. I pushed people too hard. I lost myself long before I lost everything else." He paced slowly, as if confessing required motion to keep him upright. I ignored people who cared, hurt people who trusted me, and when the betrayal happened, maybe I deserved it. Chloe winced gently. Wyatt, no one deserves betrayal. Wyatt shook his head. You don't understand. I wasn't kind. I wasn't fair. I made decisions that helped the company but broke people. His voice cracked. I became the man I promised myself I'd never be. Chloe stepped closer, her presence calm and grounding. And when did you realize that? When I saw myself in the headlines, he whispered. When I saw the world reflecting the version of me I'd been refusing to face. He exhaled shakily. It was the first time I felt ashamed. Chloe nodded slowly, the truth settling between them. And what about now? Wyatt stared at the floor. Now, I don't know who I am anymore. His honesty felt like a wound opening. Chloe reached out and gently touched his arm. Wyatt, losing yourself isn't the same as being lost forever. He looked up, meeting her unwavering gaze. There's a difference? A big one, she said softly. And God knows it. He felt a painful pressure behind his ribs, an ache he had been ignoring for months. No one's ever looked at me the way you do, he whispered. How do you see good in someone like me? Chloe's expression warmed. Because God saw good in me when I couldn't see anything at all. Wyatt blinked, surprised. You? Chloe nodded, a shadow crossing her face. I haven't told you my story yet, but kindness wasn't something I learned easily. Someone showed it to me when I least deserved it. He waited, but she didn't say more, not yet. Instead, she squeezed his arm gently. That's why I can look at you and see more than your past. He felt something like light cracking through the darkness inside him. A warmth he hadn't felt in years. Chloe, he whispered, I'm sorry for how I've acted, for pushing you away, for getting angry, for everything. She shook her head, eyes soft. You're learning how to feel again. That's not something to apologize for. Wyatt's throat tightened. He let out a shaky breath and sat on the stool behind him. For a moment, he buried his face in his hands. Chloe stood beside him, one hand resting lightly on his shoulder. No pressure, no rush, just presence. When he finally looked up, his eyes glistened. I don't know how to fix the past, he murmured. You don't have to, Chloe replied gently. God doesn't ask for perfection, only surrender. Wyatt felt the word surrender settle deep inside him. Do you think he still cares about someone like me? Wyatt asked quietly. Chloe's voice was almost a whisper. He never stopped. Wyatt inhaled sharply, emotion tightening his chest. Those words broke something inside him, and healed something too. Without warning, tears filled his eyes. Not the controlled ones he used to release behind locked doors, but raw, unfiltered tears of exhaustion and confession. Chloe stepped closer, placing a gentle hand over his. You're allowed to break, she whispered. God rebuilds people from broken places. Wyatt bowed his head as silent tears fell, grief and relief mixing in the same breath. And Chloe stayed with him, not afraid of his brokenness, not threatened by his truth. It was the first time in years he let himself feel everything. He didn't know it yet, but this moment was the doorway to his new beginning. The days after Wyatt's confession felt different, lighter somehow. Not easy, not painless, but meaningful in a way he hadn't felt in years. It was as if speaking the truth had unclenched something deep inside his chest. He woke each morning with a quiet sense of purpose, not because his life was fixed, but because his heart finally had room to breathe. Chloe noticed the change immediately. Wyatt smiled more, not wide, not often, but genuinely. He listened more, carried burdens with intention, and allowed himself to be human. The anger that once tightened his jaw was slowly dissolving. Grace was replacing the harshness pride had carved into him. One morning, as they opened the flower shop, Chloe paused by the doorway. Wyatt, look at you, she said with a small smile. He frowned playfully. Is that supposed to mean something? It means you're changing, she whispered. And it's beautiful to watch. Wyatt looked down, a warmth rising in his chest he wasn't sure how to name. "I'm trying," he admitted softly. Chloe's expression turned tender. "That's all God ever asks for. Effort, not perfection." Wyatt nodded, feeling the truth settle in him like sunlight. Later that day, while delivering an arrangement to the community center, someone stopped him. An older man, with gentle eyes. "You're the fellow from the headlines," he said frankly. Wyatt braced himself for judgment. But instead the man added, "Everyone falls. Not everyone gets back up." Wyatt blinked, stunned. "You don't mind who I used to be?" The man shrugged. "Son, if God kept records like that, none of us would stand." He walked away, leaving Wyatt frozen with unexpected hope. Maybe this town wasn't against him after all. When he returned to the shop, Chloe instantly sensed something had shifted. "Good delivery?" she asked. Wyatt hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Someone said something I didn't think I deserved to hear." "And how did it feel?" she asked gently. He took a breath. "Like forgiveness," he said quietly. Chloe's eyes softened. "Maybe God is showing you that your story isn't over after all." Wyatt felt heat rise behind his eyes. "I don't want it to be." That afternoon, the shop owner, a sweet older woman named Margaret, called Wyatt into the back room. "I heard what happened in town," she began. Wyatt tensed. "If you want me to leave, leave," she interrupted. "Sweetheart, you've been a blessing to this place." Wyatt stared at her, speechless. Margaret continued, "Everyone has a past. What matters is who you're becoming." He felt his throat tighten. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already are," she said with a smile. Wyatt stepped outside to breathe, overwhelmed. Chloe followed quietly, wiping soil from her hands. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "I think God is giving me pieces of myself back." Chloe's smile bloomed softly. "That's what he does." They stood together in the cool afternoon breeze, the scent of flowers drifting around them. Wyatt felt an unfamiliar but welcome calm settle in his chest. He wasn't healed. Not entirely. But he was healing, and that was enough. Later that week, he received an email from a former colleague. Someone he never expected to hear from again. "We want you back," the message read. Not as who you were, but as someone new. Wyatt stared at the screen in disbelief. A door he thought was sealed forever was cracking open. He showed the email to Chloe, uncertain. "I don't know if I'm ready," he admitted. Chloe gently touched his arm. "Maybe you're not supposed to be ready," she said. "Maybe you're supposed to trust." Wyatt exhaled, her words sinking deep. "What if I fail again?" he whispered. Chloe shook her head softly. "Failure didn't destroy you, Wyatt. Pride did." He swallowed hard, aware of how deeply true that was. "And God is rebuilding you differently this time." Wyatt looked at her. Really looked. At the woman who had seen him broken, angry, ashamed, and stayed. Her faith had been the rope pulling him out of the darkness. Not because she tried to fix him, but because she let God work through her. He felt gratitude swell in his chest. "I want to rebuild my life," he said quietly. "Then build it on faith, not fear," Chloe replied. Wyatt nodded, the decision forming in his heart like sunrise. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't running from his past. He was walking toward his future. And as he stepped outside the flower shop that evening, he paused. The sky burned with orange and gold like a promise written across the horizon. Wyatt breathed deeply. A man reshaped, a heart restored. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew this. God was rebuilding what pride had destroyed, and Chloe was becoming part of that miracle. There are endings we choose, and endings heaven writes for us. Wyatt Hale had lost everything the world told him mattered. His fortune, his image, his reputation, all shattered in a single night. But God was never after his image. He was after his heart. The small flower shop that felt too humble for a man like him became the very place where pride died, and where healing quietly bloomed, where truth replaced performance, where surrender replaced control, where grace rebuilt what success had once destroyed. And Chloe, the simple girl with quiet eyes and unwavering faith, didn't rescue him with perfection. She rescued him by being present, by being kind when the world was cruel, by seeing who he could be long before he believed it himself. Wyatt didn't return to his old life as the same man. He returned as someone reshaped, steadier, humbler, anchored in something unshakable. And the second chance waiting for him wasn't just a new job or a restored name. It was a restored identity. Chloe didn't walk beside him because of who he once was, but because of who God was making him become. Together they learned that love grows best in places where grace has first touched the ground, and that faith, not pride, lays the strongest foundation. In the end, Wyatt didn't just rebuild his life. He rebuilt his heart, piece by piece, surrender by surrender, guided not by power, but by purpose. Because the truth he once ran from became the truth he now lived by. I didn't lose everything. I lost what was killing me so God could give me what would heal me. If this story touched you, subscribe to Redeemed Hearts and let God speak to your heart through every chapter of healing, faith, and second chances. New stories are coming, stories that remind you that no fall is final when grace writes the ending.